Coffee. Throughout its 700-year history, it's been catalyst for international espionage, artistic genius, and political dissent. It is perked, pressed, boiled, and brewed, prepared steaming hot or icy cold, and is the world's most popular beverage. So just what is gourmet or specialty coffee? And how can you become coffee literate? In this program, we'll answer just these questions and have some fun doing it. You'll explore where coffee is grown and how it is roasted. Find out what today's coffee scene is all about, and learn how to buy quality coffee beans and make great tasting drinks at home quickly and easily. So to begin our story, let's start with a look back at this treasured drink. As with all things noble, the story of coffee's discovery is a mixture of fable and loosely defined fact. As legend has it, over 1,000 years ago, a young Ethiopian goat herd named Kaldi awakened one morning to find his flock jumping and dancing with delight. He soon found the source of their excitement, a smallish tree dotted with bright red berries. Following their lead, he sampled the fruit and was soon dancing merrily himself. Later, he gave some of his find to a nearby monastery, providing a new level of enthusiasm to the monks' long evening prayers and launching the coffee industry in the process. For the next several hundred years, Arabian traders carefully guarded coffee's production from the outside world, selling only boiled or roasted beans that could not germinate and grow. Meanwhile, by the 17th century, coffee was slowly making its way from the Middle East through Constantinople to Europe. In the early days, the beverage often met with religious intolerance. Pope Clement VII was at first skeptical and decided it required papal review. Upon trying the brew for himself, however, he quickly determined that this was a drink worthy of baptism, opening the doors for coffee's spread throughout Europe. The first breach in Arabian security occurred in 1690, when the Dutch managed to smuggle seedlings to Java via the Horn of Africa. These far-flung tropical colonies proved ideal for the production of coffee, and the worldwide supply quickly increased. But it took an act of love to bring the New World into the picture. In 1715, the Dutch, eager to make friends with France, presented King Louis XIV with a single coffee tree. Shortly thereafter, an enterprising young captain of infantry, Gabriel de Clou, felt certain that the Caribbean climate of Martinique was perfect for this tree. With much daring and romantic ingenuity, de Clou obtained 3 small coffee plants. However, the journey proved difficult and rations were scarce. 2 of the plants died en route, but the captain managed to keep the last one alive by sharing his own meager supply of water. He was soon rewarded with a bountiful harvest of magnificent beans. And today, all gourmet coffee grown in the Americas can be traced to de Clou and his single surviving tree. Meanwhile, back on the continent, coffee houses were experiencing enormous success. The power of the drink was such that Voltaire, France's most famous writer and philosopher, was said to have consumed 50 cups of the stuff a day. When advised that coffee was surely a slow poison, he remarked, "It must be slow. I've been drinking it for 65 years now, and I'm not yet dead." Coffee also proved popular with artists and great composers. When King Frederick the Great banned coffee drinking for commoners, none other than Johann Sebastian Bach himself wrote his Coffee Cantata. The piece tells the story of a father who tells his daughter to break her coffee habit. This is no easy task for the girl, who declares that no suitor need come calling with intent of marriage, lest he be willing to give her the freedom to make coffee whenever she wants. Even Ludwig van Beethoven couldn't resist the call of coffee. Beethoven meticulously insisted on counting out precisely 60 beans for each cup. In London, King Charles II was so concerned about discussions of political plots for unrest that he issued a proclamation that closed these resorts of disaffected persons who disturbed the peace and quiet of the nation. Said proclamation was promptly revoked 11 days hence, upon threat of the very revolt he sought to intercept. As a side note, it seems that service in these establishments was not always the most swift, so a brass box was often installed with the inscription to ensure prompt service, or what we now call tips. By the mid-1700s, the East India Company had pushed more vigorously the sale of tea, and England, along with her American colonies, consumed less coffee. That is, until a memorable December night that came to be known as the Boston Tea Party. This event, to protest the king's unfair taxation, elevated coffee to the status of patriotic beverage of choice. In fact, coffee houses had already served the colonists well. Daniel Webster dubbed the Green Dragon of Boston the headquarters of the Revolution. And in New York City, Merchant's Coffee House was chosen as the site for a grand celebration in honor of the nation's first president. In the years that transpired after the Revolution, coffee became an American passion. But following World War II, as coffee companies competed for market share, they turned to cheaper, less flavorful beans. By the 1960s, the taste of coffee, or lack thereof, was credited with a steady decline in consumption. Today, however, an increasing number of gourmet coffee dealers have reintroduced the world's finest coffees to a thirsty public. Yemen Mocha, Celebes Colossi, Guatemala Antigua, Hawaiian Kona. The names read like entries in an adventurer's diary. Coffee is grown in over 50 countries in an area straddling the equator, from the Tropic of Cancer to the Tropic of Capricorn. Let's take a closer look at where some of the more readily available specialty coffees are produced. Africa has some very fine and distinctive coffees, including the original mocha. Some of the most notable producers today are Ethiopia, Kenya, Zimbabwe, Yemen, and Tanzania. In Asia and the Pacific, the coffee comes from some rather romantic and exotic locations. They include India, the Indonesian islands of Sumatra, Java, and Sulawesi, formerly known as the Celebes, Papua New Guinea, and the Hawaiian Islands, featuring the well-known Kona. In the Americas, we find the world's largest producer, Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, Ecuador, Central America's Guatemala and Costa Rica, and finally Jamaica, home of the extremely rare Jamaica Blue Mountain. So just what is specialty coffee?
Specialty coffee is the best coffee grown in the particular regions where it comes from. It's amazing that there's so many different taste variations from different countries from around the world. For instance, Kenya coffee is a coffee that's very sharp in taste, has very high acidity, versus a Sumatra, which would be is probably the lowest acidity of all coffees, and very musty in flavor, almost an earthy-like tone, and very heavy in body.
Most of the coffee grown today consists of two species, Coffea arabica and Coffea robusta. Although they're similar in appearance, in terms of quality and flavor, they couldn't be further apart. Robusta grows at lower altitudes and has a heavier-bodied, harsher taste. These are typically much lower in price and are most often used in commercial coffees. Arabica coffees, however, are mountain-grown, and they have more complex and delicate flavors. It's the finest Arabicas that make their way to the specialty coffee market. Coffee ripens at different intervals over a several-month period, so the best coffee really is picked bean by bean to capture the peak flavor. The fruit or cherry is about the size of a grape, and it turns from green to a brightly colored red when it's ready to harvest. Inside are usually 2 beans. When there's only a single more round bean, it's called a pea berry. Preparing the cherry for shipment can take 2 weeks or longer. For the most part, this is a natural process, and the best coffees are usually sun-dried. Depending on the growing region, 2 basic techniques are used: the more common wet or washed method, which we'll talk about in a moment, and the dry or unwashed process. Dry processing occurs mainly in Brazil, as with the Fazenda Vista Alegre shown here, and in a few smaller regions where the climate is relatively dry. After the coffee is picked, it is spread on large floors and allowed to dry with the skin still on. This skin is later removed, milled to remove the parchment, and separated into different grades for export. Although the methods of growing and processing coffee will vary from region to region, most of the basics are similar. Of all the places coffee is grown, one that has consistently produced a high-quality product on American soil is Hawaii's Kona.
Coffee was introduced to Hawaii in 1825, and there's about 2,400 acres of coffee right now in Kona. I think Kona coffee is special because the region it grows in, you can't duplicate it anywhere in the world. It's on relatively new volcanic land. We have slopes of terrain that are just ideal for wind flow, air flow. We have the cloud coverage that comes in, gives us the shade. And our volcanic soil is something that just produces a very, very unique coffee.
Growing coffee in Kona has been for the most part a family operation, with farms passed down for several generations. Although the farms were small, the families certainly weren't.
We have 5 kids, 5 in a family, a small family. Now, wow, they think you're crazy to have 5 kids. Yeah, we all worked, and I think this is what brought the family really close together. Most of the families had donkeys. I think very few had trucks, you know, because there was no roads, and you know, this is all up on a hill, and we didn't have 4-wheel drive cars at those days, you know, so donkeys was the thing. And but very slow, because when you're coming downhill, well, like here it's downhill, you know, and when it rains, you know how slippery it is. Donkeys are very cautious when they walk. They're really slow, and you just gotta follow from the back. And when you have your whole family picking coffee, and during the peak season, it takes almost, I was hauling coffee almost all day just to bring them down. We try to grow good stuff. You feel proud that it's something people like.
Once the coffee's picked, it's taken immediately to the mill. Often the relationship between the farmer and the processor goes back many years. It's very important that they work closely together. In many ways, they're dependent upon each other's efforts to produce a consistently high-quality product, which allows them to command a high price in the market. In Kona, all of the coffee is processed using the wet or washed method.
The wet mill, or the pulping mill as they call it, is the place where you make the best quality possible out of the coffee. You take the skin off, you soak it overnight, and get the mucilage or the fruit off of the seed, and take it out onto the drying floors and dry it to a